Our two guests tonight represent a beguiling study in contrast. One of them, Max Lerner, is a distinguished journalist, teacher, and historian, a sort of burgomaster in the liberal intellectual community of this country. He lives in a brownstone in New York City. The other is a young man of 28 who covered the anti-war movement as a journalist, has traveled around the world, and recently came back to Vermont to build his own home in the woods, where he lives, according to Max Lerner, quote, "a life closer to Thoreau's at Walden Pond than anyone I know." He's Max's son, Steve Lerner. This is Roundtable on New Year's Day, so Happy New Year. We're going to talk tonight with the Lerners and about the tie that binds father and son in the terribly complicated world of 1975. Welcome to Roundtable, Lerners. Max, you've written a distinguished work called America's a Civilization, and you've dealt with family among many other things in the book. Where's the father-son relationship these days, as you see it?
I think it's where it always has been and always will be. I think it's the strongest single relationship in life, barring none, both from my own personal experience and from whatever I've learned about human history. And no matter what else is going to happen to human interrelationships, I think the father-son thing is going to stay.
What's your relationship with your father?
Oh, it was a very good one. My father was a gentle person, very impractical, very scholarly. When he was in Russia, we came over like any immigrant family, the early part of the century, and then he got lost in this jungle of the big cities in the United States and had a rough and tragic time. But it was a very cohesive family.
What did he do?
He was, for a while, a farmer, for a while peddled milk from door to door, for a while a small storekeeper, and then went back toward the end of his life to become a Hebrew teacher, which is where he started. But as I say, it was a cohesive family. One of the things that troubles me, Harold, very much when I think of my own, the family I come from, and look around at the families today, is that the kind of difficulties immigrant families had to confront made them really stick together. It was hard ground. Whereas families today, of course, I don't know, Steve, but did you have a sense of hard ground difficulties when you were growing up?
Not at all. I felt quite the reverse, and that was that the challenge was to go out or away from a very stable or solid base, and that the challenge was not to stick together in the face of adversity, but rather to seek out adventure, I would say.
Yeah, I have a feeling that much of what we've called the rebellion of the young toward the end of the 50s and in the 60s, all through the 60s, came out of a desire to find hard ground because it wasn't there as it was with the immigrant experience.
Well, let's talk just a moment about the differences between the kind of life you lead and the kind of life Steve leads, because you wrote a very charming column about going to visit him in the Vermont woods.
Yes.
What's your view of the kind of life that he leads? And Steve, I'm going to ask you what your view of your father's life is now.
Well, I loved it when I came there, but I must say I doubt if I could survive under it very long. It was pretty rough. And while I would love to have that solitude, a Thoreau-like solitude, and I could get a lot of writing done, I would want to come back and touch base again in this marvelous city of New York. Remember E.B. White said, "Which not to have known would be like death."
Yes, marvelous.
I'm afraid the pavements are in my blood. And in that sense, I think Vermont's a good place to visit, but not to live.
Well, Steve, I believe you pointed out in your column, was living practically a self-sufficient life. Is that correct, Steve? How do you live up there?
Well, I wouldn't say it's entirely self-sufficient, but I've been making an effort in the last couple of years to place myself in a position where I would be capable of surviving independent of what happens to the economic system in this country, and where my livelihood and the livelihood of the people kind of immediately living around me is no longer dependent on Grand Union or A&P or Standard Oil or General Motors. In other words, I no longer have a whole lot of confidence in the corporate system, and therefore I'm beginning to assemble the tools to for my own survival and for my own independence, I would say.
How self-sufficient have you become?
Well, as I say, it's difficult, and I've grown the food that I need to eat until the next harvest, and I live in a house that I've built, so that the basics are now more or less taken care of. Although I had to do a lot of factory work before I got to that level of self-sufficiency. In other words, the move back to the land, or the move to the country, included a stint where I was even more at the mercy of the system than I was in the city. In other words, I was a badly paid factory worker, and that was part of the dues of kind of becoming self-sufficient, getting out from under having to pay rent, getting out from the outrageous price of food these days, and so I'm just beginning to make steps in that direction.
Do you have electricity?
Yes, I do, but I'm not dependent on it, and I went through a long period all last winter where I was drawing my own water, and which is really, to me at least, what it comes down to, is whether you have a pump that brings the water into your house or whether you haul it up by hand. I mean, lighting doesn't seem to me that crucial, although I like record players and whatnot, but I'm not dependent on the juice from the outside. I think
Nor income?
Again, I still try to make a buck when I can, and it's getting harder and harder these days, but I've joined a part of the economy, and I think a growing part of the economy, that is no longer dependent on having a full-time job in order to take care of the basics of life. And I think a lot of people in our society are going to be more and more tempted to work out some kind of living solution where they can be more or less sure that they can grow the food they need.
Max, you're a historian and economist. What's your view of this movement of young people, as your son himself is moving, towards away from the city, away from industry, away from the technology of our society? Is this a privilege of the middle class and the upper middle class that is going to further weaken the structure of the society? Is it something that you think is a beneficent development for the society? What do you feel about it?
I think it's an important movement. I think it's a healthy movement. I think in some individual cases it's a matter of privilege of the middle class. That is, the young people doing it know that there is at some point something to fall back on, but those are just some cases. On the whole, I think that it's an earnest effort at independence. I must say I have great admiration for it. And not only admiration for the individuals like Steve and others that I know, but admiration for the movement as a whole. But I have some questions too. And one question is where it goes to, what the outcome is. Suppose you go on, Steve, you and others, suppose you go on not being dependent on the economy. Is what you're driving at ultimately that you're going to have a society of individuals living in this way, going back to a kind of pre-capitalist, pre-industrial system? Is that what you're driving at? Or is what you're driving at to try to have a kind of envelope within a larger envelope so that what you're doing can reform and renew and refresh what the larger economy and what the larger culture is doing?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. That's like asking me what I think is going to happen, and I'm hesitant to make any long-term predictions. But I feel that an alternate kind of economy is developing, and it's more a economy based on need rather than want, or need rather than desire. And this is a distinction that I think many of the people in my in my community are being forced to make, and that is that the frills are being cut away, and I think people are doing it largely because of their own sense of values, and because they don't want to be in the position of being an oppressor. Although I hate to sound overly moralistic or strident, I think a lot of the people who I know are making an effort not to put themselves over other people, and they are reacting also, I think, to this corporate machine, which they feel is doing some evil in the world. And again, I know that this skirts rhetoric, but I do feel that in order to talk about the movement away from the system, you have to speak about the reasons that people are moving away from the system. And it's not just the unemployment lines.
Yes.
It's not just the fact that the welfare system is a mockery when compared with even our neighbors, the Canadians. It also has to do with what the American corporate giant has been up to. I mean, I look to the lesson that I feel we should be learning from the Vietnam War. And I think a lot of people who are moving out and are looking for their own stable economic base are looking not to be part of the machine that does things like that.
See, I think we can feel this way about the corporate giants, and to a considerable extent, of course, I do, as others do. But then you ask, I still have to ask what the outcome is. You'll have to, at some point, make a bid for power. You can't just stay there on your hilltop, you and others on hilltops. That when you have the power, you're going to have to face the questions that power always brings with it, which means you'll have to face the questions of what kind of organization you're going to have in the society, unless indeed this remains what I think it's likely to remain, something marginal to the society, healthy in giving it freshness and vigor, but not trying to replace the larger structure that we have. That's the vision I have of it myself. But I'm very open to your vision, Steve, if you try to think through what you're going to do with power.
Well, I think we have a different view of power, although I think already in the valley where I live, a number of people who are involved in kind of collective farming that we do are interested in local and state politics. That their primary concern, I would say, is more with living, being a living example of what they feel to be kind of right livelihood,
Right.
than it is to make a bid for power, because well, we're not in a position to seize power, and I think often that what we can do is we can change the kind of level of consciousness much more easily than we can pull off a political coup.
Yeah.
And that the lifestyle, or the way one lives one's life, is very influential in terms of what happens politically in a country.
I find to some extent among my students, I find a spread of this kind of idea. They are less activist than they used to be in your time at college in the 60s, far less activist politically, and in other ways they are far more conscious of the whole question of what their own personal way of living is going to do as an example to the society. In this sense, I suppose the counterculture has outlasted the activist culture of the 1960s.
Yeah, I wouldn't separate them so much, in that I feel the counterculture was always backing up the political activism of the 60s, and that you will see a rebirth of political activity among people who are grouped in the counterculture. And that is that there's a strong feeling of support, for instance, for the unconditional and total amnesty movement that is alive in this country. And there is a great deal of support for different, environmental movements,
right,
which people feel very strongly about. Now, these to me are political. I mean, people feel that for one thing, that our involvement in Vietnam is not over. And I think there still exists a strong kind of grassroots movement of people who want to see a real amnesty take place in this country, and who want to see our involvement in Vietnam end.
I'm glad your emphasis is that, because with a number of young people that I've watched in recent years, the emphasis has been mostly toward being alone or in little clusters, toward meditating, toward getting a new sense of consciousness, toward what Castaneda calls a separate reality. And the influence seems to me to have been not so much from Thoreau, which I think is a very, a native influence, but from Asia, from India, from the East. And on that, my question has been and still is, can we take a doctrine which grew up amidst poverty and powerlessness and all the rest of it, which was a doctrine aimed to combat that, to cope with it, can we take that and transplant it into a setting which has the whole Western tradition behind it? And for that reason, I must say I feel very good at when you say that the present tendency is to try to combine elements of political consciousness with this other consciousness.
Yeah, I think it goes further than that. You mentioned the influence of Eastern philosophy in the West, and I feel that it is having and will have an increased influence, in that many of the people who are part of the challenger or the counterculture are seen in Eastern philosophy something that they didn't find in Christianity. They are seen a set of values that they can relate to, even though it is somewhat more at a distance to their own culture. And I think they also find that yoga is a tool for them, and will be a very, very effective tool for them in establishing their new lives, and also in dealing with other people.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Steve, may I interrupt just to ask? I've been sitting here really entranced by the fact that you sit and chat so easily together. Do you do this often?
Yes, indeed.
Well, often we do it sometimes. We don't really see that much of each other.
That's right.
We do it whenever we have a chance, whenever we're brought together.
When did you first have a dialogue? Either of you remember?
It went along, I would say, from the time Steve was able to talk, and I was able to talk. It's been pretty continuous.
Is that your recollection, Steve?
I don't really remember when it started. You mean on political subjects,
No,
or
on
just
anything that
on
you could sit
anything?
and talk together easily?
I have a feeling it's always been easy to speak with my father. Yeah, even though we often disagree.
Very, very sharply disagree.
Yeah.
And he's taught me a lot, may I say. He taught me a lot about the war, very, very much about the war, and changed my views on it.
Really? How?
Yes. Oh, in the direction of understanding how wrong it was. Took me some doing. And he and I'm talking now of both Steve and Michael, his older brother. In both cases, our dialogue led to some changes in me. I hope to some changes in them on some scores, and also on the whole question of the role of the young in our society. And I must say, some impact on myself. I now appear before my university classes, for example, very differently from the way I used to. I never wear a tie in class now.
You have a good stand of hair, I see. Also.
Yeah, well, but I think one of the things the young people have done has been to have a great influence on their parents' generation on the whole question of lifestyle.
Am I not correct that in the mid-'60s, much of the youth culture, rock music, for example, suggested the parent as a common enemy? Did you all experience that at all? Did you ever have a sense, Steve, that you were within an establishmentarian structure that warred against your natural impulses and interests?
Yes, I feel sometimes that there are differences in the way I choose to lead my life from the way I was brought up, but I don't feel no, I don't feel that kind of that my parents are my enemy, and I never have. I don't know if
they're often wrong.
Well, I mean, we're often wrong. I don't think I didn't notice that in my growing up.
What was the familial institution that best allowed you to sit and talk together? You're a man whose time must be an enormous demand on him and moving in many directions and many interests. How did you ever find time to sit and talk to Steve?
What about it? I would say one institution we had was before dinner all the time. We always had a family hour together.
I would say at dinner.
And at dinner.
Yes, there was I would say the debate was usually most lively over a piece of meat. Yeah.
Any particular cut?
Yeah, I think I grew up with a good piece of steak, and that's something that's changed in my life. I don't buy meat anymore, although when it's set before me, I still find it hard to resist. But again, this is a real and a very fundamental change in my life in the course of a couple of years, and that is not only do I find it very difficult to afford buying meat, but I also am beginning to look at it in terms of what the rest of the world has to eat and what meat really means. I mean, meat is a symbol in our culture, and it was in our family. It was like the good life was coming together over a piece of steak and sitting down and really having a good meal. And the meal was not complete without a really solid piece of meat there.
That's partly the immigrant background, I think, myself.
Well, it's incredible you put it in those terms, though.
Yeah, well, now, I mean, when you look at what we pay for meat, I just don't mean in terms of the dollars that you put on the counter to get a piece of steak. I mean in terms of the grain that is fed to the animals in order to produce that piece of steak. It's like a 10-to-1 ratio where you're losing, 10 units of protein to the 1 unit of protein that you're getting back. And I find that myself pretty outrageous considering what is happening in the world today.
But do you feel, Steve, that if the centerpiece edibly of the menu before you had been corn on the cob, you could have still had these marvelous discussions with your family?
I do, and I think it's coming. I think that's one of the revolutions that's going to happen in our lives is going to be a really radical change in what we eat.
We had some other forums, shall we say, for discussion. One was in the country where we would go out chopping wood, and the boys would lustily help. More recently, I visit Vermont, and I help Steve with his wood cutting. But then there was another, and that is that all through the years when I was teaching at Brandeis and commuting between New York and Boston, both Michael and Steve were going to school and then college in the Boston area, and we had a regular practice of sitting down every week and having dinner together.
Once a week?
Once a week, yes, once a week.
What?
All through that decade of the 60s. And it was a way, I must say, I'm very happy about it. It was a way by which this particular father and these particular sons kept in touch with each other where other fathers and sons didn't have a chance to.
Let's talk about why that's so. Because there was a thing called a communications gap in this country
yes.
between parents and children.
And we used to sit there in Cambridge and really, really argue and fight, but we always kept touch with
Why
each
is
other.
that?
Well, we made an effort. Yes? I think so. We liked each other. We wanted to exchange ideas, and maybe we wanted to reform each other. I'm not sure. Just possible.
Well, your lifestyles are certainly very different today, are they?
I would say that yes, they're different at the moment, but I look back to the time when my father came to this country and to the kind of life that he led as an immigrant here, and I find very often when I'm doing some hard physical labor that is directly related to my survival, I think of you when you were out delivering milk in New Haven and when you were on a farm that was failing, and I draw a lot of my strength from feeling that you came through that, and I think in a way that while I react to the stable and very generous upbringing that I was afforded, that your life, in a way, is a reaction to the quite deprived childhood that you were given.
Yes, in my luxury, Babylonian luxury today, it's a reaction. Yes, I think there's a lot to that, but I love this way of putting it. It's a kind of Nietzschean eternal recurrence. Goes around in circle, and the circle meets. And there is Steve really doing, in terms of the present day, what my father and mother had to encounter in terms of their day. Yes.
Is that, excuse me, Steve.
Well, I was just thinking that somewhere I heard that the saying that it skips a generation, which essentially means that the son is more like the grandfather than his father. And I think that that is just the eternal action-reaction, and that we react to the life that we were given, and it reflects more or less back to our grandparents.
Well, I hope that there have been lots of fathers and sons who have watched this evening, and that 1975 will be as pleasant for all of you as it's been for Steve and Max Lerner. This is Roundtable. Good night. I'm Harold Hayes.